And I want for the listeners to know that the very first time I was called strong, I was so taken aback by it because for so long I felt so weak and I felt like I allowed things. And so I want to invite that we open up a different perspective because I wouldn't have believed it. I didn't.
Welcome to the Stress to Success Shift podcast with Dr. Irene, where you'll learn powerful tools from world-class experts to bounce back from burnout and shift into success mode in all areas of your life, your career and wealth, health and energy, relationships, and personal life. Welcome. Today, I am so honored to have a very special guest. Her name is Jessie Torres, and Jessie is a certified master peak performance and transformation coach. She has additional master's certifications in meditation, heart math as a trainer, a Reiki practitioner, and a domestic violence counselor. She has literally coached thousands of high performance people from all walks of life and various parts of the world who have achieved the success and the highest level of fulfillment. Jessie is the founder of Fierce Grace Transformation, a course and coaching platform that helps high-achieving entrepreneurs and leaders move from burnout and high stress to achieve passion, purpose, and impact while growing their businesses and maximizing the results in all areas of their lives. And today, Jessie is with us. I already know this is going to be part one. Because there's so much for us to discuss, and I really want you all to have the full benefit of learning from Jessie. So today we're going to talk about Jessie's history of her life and the trauma that she has suffered and how she transcended that. Thank you so much for being here, Jessie. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's my privilege and honor. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. When I was offered the opportunity to have you speak on my podcast, I was like, yes, of course. So let's hop right into it, Jessie. And so often is the case, your mess is your message, right? And so I would love to have you tell our audience why you now have the life and the calling you do, and specifically with regard to, since we're talking about trauma, the traumas that you have suffered and how you transcended them.
Absolutely. It is a loaded question, so buckle up and what do they say? You get your tray tables upright and your seat upright, because here we go. I want to preface the story with acknowledging the people in the story, how I am completely at a place of forgiveness and love. And so when I talk about some of the trauma moments, I'd like to emphasize that I am in only love with every person that was involved in the divine choreography that was my life. I think it's important to say that because, some of it is not very pretty. And so I want to make sure and acknowledge that although it was dark and it was, whoops, sorry, too many hand gestures, that there was a coming through to be able to now be witness to all of it and love everyone as a part of my divine plan. So for me, I have a history. My parents are both from Peru. They immigrated here and didn't speak the language. And when I was born, I knew Spanish as my first language, but I was born here in America. And in that, my mom was 9 years younger than my father. And my father was married before and had 3 kids that my mom didn't know of. So she actually came to America to leave him, and he came after her, and then proceeded to marry her here, had me and my brother. And what I have known as my childhood was just a history from the first memory I could have of sexual abuse with my father. My father, it was something I didn't understand. I just knew my father loved me. I felt special. I idolized him. I thought that I was, something about me was special, that he would take me to adult parties. He should have been taking my mom when I was only 7 years old. And, but I didn't know. I just thought, wow, I get to sit next to him in the car. I get to, it was all this stuff. And I didn't even realize then what it was creating as a wedge between my mother and I. I was just an innocent child who thought her daddy really favored her. When things would happen that were uncomfortable, again, I didn't know any different until I did, until I started to, get into my junior high years, my teen years, and I started to really feel uncomfortable, and the things escalated and got worse. At the time, I had an older brother who he was 15 months older than me, and he was like my only safety. Because when I was 16, I tried to tell my mom what was going on. And my words were, I used the word molest. And in Spanish, molestar means to bother or annoy. And my dad must have twisted my words, but my mom never spoke to me of it again. And so in that moment, I anchored for the second time, my voice doesn't matter. Just shut up and take it. And when I was younger, one particular incident that stands out the most, I guess you would say one of the most traumatic moments of it, was because it happened to be in front of a bathroom mirror. And so I was witness to it. And when I was witness to it, and what happened in my mind was I was begging, I was pleading, I was crying, I was asking for him to stop, and he wouldn't. And I remember anchoring again. That was the first time I anchored, your voice doesn't matter. Just shut up, because it's not going to change. It's not going to stop. And then the other part was my father never punished me if he didn't get his way. He punished my mother and my brother. So as a child, I took that as my responsibility. It's my fault when there's unhappiness in the home. It's my fault when my mom is crying and my brother's listening to sad music. And so even though there was times that I wanted to resist, I knew that my resistance would cause them pain. So then I would just shut up and take it. So as I was navigating that, when I turned 18, I thought, okay, I'm an adult now. I'm going to rebel. Basically, it's like, Dad, tell me what you want from me, because I'm going to do the opposite. Right. So you want me home at what time? Midnight? Okay, I'll be home at 2. I left, and I was just seeking to not be at home where he was still coming after me. And my mom would cry every day. Why are you leaving? Why are you doing this? And I remember just looking at her going like confused as to why she didn't understand, but I still left, and in the context of that, I met my future husband. And it was in a friendship. It was people that I was hanging out with in the area we lived. And I met this gentleman, and he, not my future husband, but this other gentleman who was a typical bad boy. This is back in the 80s. So we're talking breakdancing, and he was a DJ, and he was Cuban. And I was not attracted to Latin men because my dad kind of just wedged that for me. But he was everything that my dad hated. And in my mind, I thought, okay, you're going to be the one. You're going to be the one that's going to be the first person I sleep with, which was, again, interesting what we do when we believe I'm going to use you to punish my dad, right? When it's my body I'm giving up. Right. But again, we don't know any better. And so he was a part of the friend group. And then he had a friend who was in the military, and he would talk about him from here and there. And then when he got out of the military, he joined us, and that was going to be my future husband. I didn't know it at the time, but he came from Germany, overseas, being in the army, and he was engaged. So I didn't anticipate anything with him, but there was this spark that I didn't understand. And he actually was the very first person. He took me out on a date and brought me home late, and my dad was out on the porch, and he said to him, you get out. And to me, he said, you get in this house. And then, proceeded to like berate me all night and tell me all these things that I was, because I wasn't coming home on time. Next day, my boyfriend at the time said, what's up with your dad? And I said, why? He was mad because you brought me home late. And he said, no, that was not an angry father. That was a jealous man. And that statement opened Pandora's box up with me, because no one had ever spoken about what I was experiencing. And I probably shared with him more than I needed to. But in that moment of unpacking everything I had experienced, he still wanted to be with me. And so in my traumatized mind, I was like, you still like me with all my dirty exposed, because I was now living in a pool of shame. And because he still liked me, I fell madly in love. And now it's just like, it's all I wanted to do was be with him, be with him, be with him. I wanted to get out of my house. I told my mom, I'm going to move in with him. He wanted to become a police officer. So he had just gotten his acceptance papers. He was living downtown Los Angeles. And I said, I'm going to move in with him. My mom, who's very devout Catholic, she said, my daughter's not going to live with a man and not be married. So I moved out Monday and I was married Friday. And from that moment, we both didn't realize the trauma that we were bringing into the relationship. He was raised by an alcoholic mother, the youngest of four, the only boy. His mother used to beat his sisters unconscious. He'd come from school, they'd be unconscious on the floor. It was just really traumatic. So we had shared our stories and we thought, he said, I'm never going to let my kids see me drink. And I said, my kids will never be molested. And we thought we fixed it. And so we went into this marriage. He was 21, I was 18. And proceeded to have my 3 children throughout the context. I'm really trying to condense this. When my kids turned 6 and my daughter was 4, I have twin boys. I have twin boys and my daughter was 4. We had a series in a year, I believe, of deaths. My husband at the time's sister committed suicide, and a year later, I don't remember the timing exactly, but it was a period of 4 deaths where his police partner, put in a John Wayne movie when he got home from work and had an aneurysm and died. He was 38 years old. He left 2 little kids. His uncle, who was worked on the Puget Sound in Washington, stepped on a boat, and those big cranes with those big metal balls and the hooks on them just fell on his head, like literally tragic, horrible things. And my brother was murdered. So now again, jolt, right? Jolt of trauma. Another, like, and that moment I turned my back on God. I was angry. I was like, how dare you take my brother from me? And so it could really start to spiral me right into this belief that this is like, what did I do to deserve all of this? I was still in my marriage, but ultimately it was an act of kindness that got me to a place where I decided to leave my marriage. Because what I didn't share is, because of the trauma that we were both bringing, I was very submissive, and he only knew how to speak with vulgarities and rage with his mother because she was a raging alcoholic. And so that dynamic entered our marriage. And so he was verbally abusive, mentally abusive, emotionally abusive. Like I honor women that have been through domestic violence, but honestly, a punch in the nose would have been better for me instead of the emotional hits that I constantly took, to the point that I died in every way a human could die. I came to a tipping point of really just praying every day that somebody would blow the red light so I could be done with this existence, because divorce wasn't an option. And I would literally like pray that a plane would crash when he went and traveled. And then I had massive shame and guilt over wishing such a thing, but I didn't see a way out. And I took a course in a local community college, and to cut it short, these people just treated me kindly. I didn't understand what it was. It short-circuited me. I'm like, why are you guys being nice to me? And it was because I was videotaping them and I was doing all this stuff. And I didn't identify it as kindness, but what my inner inside said, I don't know what this is, but if this is available, this feeling, life is worth living. And it gave me the courage to actually get out of my situation, my marriage. And once out of that, it exploded into a lot of trauma again, because he was so enraged that other than my brother's death, it was one of the worst months of my life navigating that. He was making death threats to my boss. He was making death threats to my teacher. He was just on a rampage. In the meantime, I'm trying to take care of my kids. And by the way, did I mention I was making 30 grand a year back then? So now I'm having to pick up the pieces. He walked out from our home, said, here's, I'm foreclosing to the car, Toyota, here's the keys. I'm not paying for it. I was turned upside down in every way a human could. And it was in those moments of survival that I made a decision to understand. I just want to understand. I never would read. I'd always fall asleep. I realized at 38 years old, then I was clueless as to who I was. I had no idea who Jessie was. I didn't know my favorite color. I didn't know what food I liked. I liked everything he liked because it kept the peace. And so I literally had created no identity other than the hypervigilance of what was my life. Navigating the grief from my brother, my only safety ever, still navigating my father and my mother and that whole dynamic, because it all came out what was happening and caused devastation in the family and now in my marriage. So I was literally at that point where I need to understand. I want to know why my father did what he did, why my mom ignored me, why my husband did what he did, and why I allowed it. And I started to have an insatiable hunger and obsession almost to understand. So I'd pick up books, I go to workshops, I was going to therapy myself. And I told my therapist, I said, I really want to do what you do, because you really help people, but that's a lot of school and that's a lot of years. And she said, you should be a coach. And back then, this is back in 2006. So coaching wasn't as big as it is now. And I was like, what do you mean, soccer coach? That's literally what my mindset was. And so I looked into it. And as I was looking into it, I'm more of a physical learner. And the one physical, the Hudson Institute, who had physical training, it was too much money for me to invest. And so I found a different one, Coaches Training Institute, and they had half online, half in person. And so I went with that one. And as you go through coach training or any kind of personal development, you're going through it yourself. You're learning about yourself as you're learning how to help others. And I fell in love with it. And part of it also came because I started to have dialogue with people about my story after coming out of my marriage. And people would be like, where do I leave my $10 copay? Or can I write down what you just said? Or, and I'd be like, what's happening? And one lady, she actually gave me, I still have the little dish, says you inspire. And I remember thinking after a lunch when she's like, you really inspire me. And I could, let me just give you a copay or something. And I was so elated, and I walked away so happy and turned on. I was something just happened. I don't even know. And it was me telling my story. Then there's something to this. There's something to this. And I need to figure out what this is. And in doing that, I got my certification. I became a CTI coach, but I was working full-time in a job that required overtime, and it was never enough. So I was reaching that burnout point. Hair clumps were falling out in my shower. I had heart palpitations. They put me on a heart monitor, and I told them the stress I was under. And they told me, well, yes, you have this condition. We can give you beta blockers to help your heart from skipping. And you'll have to take them for the rest of your life. I'm like, hold on a minute. So I was like, wait, so you want to give me a pill that controls the rhythm of my heart and I can keep my stress? I walked out of that doctor's office, and I quit 2 weeks later, and I never took the pill, and my heart is fine. So I understand the dynamics of the depths that stress can create in the body, in our beautiful human vehicles, when it is not addressed. And so from that created the unfolding of me diving deeper into personal development. I went to a Tony Robbins event, which was all, again, serendipity. It was just the way it all orchestrated. My sister, who was in real estate, they're always doing trainings. She invited me to this seminar, and it was a young guy, Matthew Ferry, and he had the sabotaging voice was the drunk monkey, which I thought was funny. And he was talking, and I'd never been to anything like this. And I was like, this is really cool. And at one point in the seminar, he said, my mentor, Tony Robbins, he says, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, well, if I like this guy, who's this Tony Robbins dude? Right. So I looked him up, and I wanted to attend his workshop. My cousin and I went, and it just unlocked a whole nother level. And I thought, I want this environment. At the time, again, I was trying to build my coaching practice while working full time, and I wasn't making traction. And so I really wanted to be a part of this community. So I'll stop right there, just to kind of, this is part of the trauma and the unfolding of what had me seek a different way. And I can go further into where I am now, but I'd like to take a pause right there.
Thank you so much. And I will be sure to put warnings, kind of like instead of PG or whatever, I guess it would be PG warnings on this, because your story is so profound to the point that it's jarring. and I'm very honored that you could be vulnerable, and I know that you do this for your living now. And at the same time, I do know how challenging it is to be vulnerable and bare your soul and your weaknesses, your perceived weaknesses to others. So I just really, really honor you
Thank you.
for that, for your journey, and know that you are helping so many people by sharing that story, so that they know that they're not alone, that if it can happen to you, it can happen to anyone.
Yes.
And that to me is the most powerful part of transcending your trauma. And it starts with that decision. That decision is you said, of why me? Why did this happen? I always say awakening awareness is 80% of the battle and the solution. And it really truly is, because until you wake up and go, hang on, things aren't necessarily the way I always thought they were, right? In terms of what that made me as a person, or that I should be ashamed of myself, or that I was used goods, or however the phrases that come to mind. And so I can't emphasize enough just how powerful even that awareness and that choice that you made many choices.
Yeah.
And to go against your religion even, and your family, to leave your husband, that I know must have taken so much inner strength for you to do that. And you truly are a strong woman.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to say something about that, because I appreciate your reflection. And I want for the listeners to know that the very first time I was called strong, I was so taken aback by it, because for so long I felt so weak, and I felt like I allowed things. And so I want to invite that we open up a different perspective, because I wouldn't have believed it. I didn't say, I'm strong, I've got this. I didn't have those tools at the time. It was in survival that I'm just like, okay, my kids are at stake, and I have to do, I don't have another choice. So I didn't look at it as bravery or strength, or it's just like, I don't know what else to do. I have to. Now I can look at it in retrospect, and I receive your honoring of me. And even just hearing you say that, I'm like, I acknowledge it, but I want to make a preface to know that I didn't know it back then. So no matter what your situation is at this time, know that you can find the strength within later on.
Thank you so much, Jessie. Appreciate you for being here. And as I said, I know that we're having a part 2 very shortly, to show what you are doing currently with your life. Appreciate you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks for listening to the Stress to Success Shift podcast with Dr. Irene. Please head over to iTunes to subscribe and leave a review. By doing so, this will help us reach more people with our message. Be sure to visit www.drirenecobb.com to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content, and keep listening for more insights and tools to empower you to shift into success mode and enjoy life to the max.